Well, good morning to this session for OutPro Education. Today, we're going to talk to you all about resume and how this document really can be transformative, essentially, in your career branding and marketing materials. Let me just switch my screen here so we can share this with you. Oh, there we go. So, resume's job is simple. Resume's job is to produce the interview. By the way, if it's producing the interviews that you want, you likely don't need to change the resume. If it is not producing the interviews that you want, you likely do need to change that resume, and the sooner the better. Today, we'll take you through really how you can change your resume and highlight all the different things that will elevate your career brand. This is Resume Renovation for OutPro Education. Let's jump in. When we're going to solve our resume issues, emotionally, there's so many things tangled up because first off, we've experienced the journey ourselves, and a lot of that has left us tied up in knots. And if we've had a little bit of a longer career, we've experienced more time essentially being beaten down over the course of that career, and has a very negative effect over time. You've got to go back with very fresh eyes and take a new look at your story. And that means I have to not only look at the story elements to fix my resume, but I also have to look at the formatting. One or the other by themselves doesn't really fix it. I have to really look at both. So I also, of course, have to realize that we're in a new world now. And with having gone through the pandemic and all of the ramifications from that, I also have to show that I can work remotely or be effective remotely. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, we may have already had quite a bit of experience we can highlight, or we may have been at an organization that didn't go remote and we don't have as much to highlight. So whether it's working with some folks off-site, as you might see on screen here, with vendors, clients, or whoever they might be, or whether it's even doing what I'm doing, maybe presenting or talking to people, having conference calls or webinars, all of that can show that you can be effective at a distance, and that has to come into your story. That's part of the paradigm shift in retelling a story a very new way. If you haven't seen me before, author, career coach, and speaker, John Crant, resume and LinkedIn guru as well. So if your resume or LinkedIn profile are suffering from, well, really what they all suffer from, and that's bad storytelling, confessional storytelling that isn't exciting, work with someone to make it better. All my services are over on my SelfRecruiter website under the Services tab. And of course, if you need to talk before you know which package is right for you, send me a quick email and we'll set up a time to talk. Resources that'll help you. Now, SelfRecruiter book will help you a lot. You can see it on my SelfRecruiter website, also over on Amazon, and that will kind of act as a step-by-step tutorial through the entire job search process. But there are some specific articles on my LinkedIn that will also help you. So you can just go to my LinkedIn, click on the articles, and peruse those. And of course, there's even ones on resume that will piggyback on today's lecture. One other special resource, although there's a special OP version as well, this version here of my LinkedIn lecture is right on my SelfRecruiter homepage. The reason why this one's a special version is you can see me large or the slides large, very unique, and use it as a start and stop tutorial while you build out a better LinkedIn profile. That version is right on my SelfRecruiter website, halfway down the page. So let's jump in. Across the entire series, it's really becoming a self-recruiter. How is it I could be one great recruiter looking after just one great candidate? And aside from those two roles, which are both you, by the way, you've got to be the planner, the strategist, the cheerleader to pick yourself up and dust yourself off when necessary. All that is really, really important. That's a lot of becoming a self-recruiter. Mostly it's networking in a very different way. That's our proper use of LinkedIn, which will be the next in this series you should tune into. And also this concept of keeping one eye on the toughest competitor imaginable. You know, those scary people? We can beat those scary people, but we've got to keep an eye on them. We all love to see the job, go after the job. Just happens that way. Just how wonderful. If it only really worked that way. Everybody is likely doing the same thing you're doing. They're hitting that darn button. And it doesn't say apply very often. It almost always says submit, all capital letters, until we're so submissive. It's like a Friday night. Oh, they're going to call. They're going to call. It'll be a telemarketer when they do. We got to get out of this rut, which leaves us in a very unhappy place. Whether I ask folks like, how do you feel about your resume, or how do you feel about your last interview? How do you feel about your LinkedIn profile? How's your job search plan and strategy? These are all the things people will yell out because they have a lack of control. Today, we'll teach you how to control over the resume. So whatever has been holding you back in the past, like magic, we have to get over it. We have to let it go. Yes, adjust and change a few things when necessary, but we have to let it go. And we have to move from the usual customer expected into more unusual, unconventional, and unexpected places, because our job is to be persuasive. Our job is to convince them that we're the very, very best one. Now, let's get right into it. Why does a resume still matter? Aren't we in a digital world? Well, we are, but it still matters because it tends to be the first point of awareness, first point of contact about you. Could be LinkedIn if it's a great LinkedIn profile. Not too many are great LinkedIn profiles these days. So resume still tends to be the first point of contact. It's also where you have your first opportunity to begin to take control of the discussion about you. That's very, very important. But to really understand, you have to understand the challenge by the numbers. Otherwise, you really don't get how big of a mountain this is we have to climb. So if this is any kind of a decent job you're going after, that's 1,000 to 2,000 resumes being sent in on that job. That's not 1,000 to 2,000 qualified people. That's 95% of those are not right for this role. They all throw their hat into the ring because they see this one exciting job and they imagine there must be other exciting jobs around it. So who can read? I hate to ask this question. Who can read 1,000 emails, 1,000 resumes, 1,000 cover letters, and do all their own work? I don't know anybody that can do that. But that's not actually still a picture of the challenge, because if you're interacting with a recruiter, that's a external headhunter like I was, or internal recruiter, doesn't really matter if they've got that recruiter title. Those folks tend to work on 10 open jobs at the same time. So it's not 1,000, it's 10,000 emails, 10,000 resumes, 10,000 cover letters. Who could read all that? Nobody. Then it gets down to that darn applicant tracking system, tagged like an animal out in the woods. Okay. We're this product. We have seconds to make them dazzled about your product. You know, as they're droning out, looking at this giant stack of resumes, a few dozen, few hundred, I can't tell anybody apart. When they get to your resume, it's like, oh, get them in here, get them on the phone. That's the right reaction to your resume. They don't even know what they're reacting to, but they know there's value there. Mistake most people make because they try to be cookie cutter perfect. I'll just be perfect. Like, number two, I'll take number two. Number two, I'll take you, and I'm going to pay you less. Oh, you don't want less? Okay. Number three, number five, doesn't matter. You're all cookie cutter interchangeable, and you're getting less money. You have to be cookie cutter interchangeable and also be somehow different, exceptional, special, a step out of line in the process. It may be 3, 4, 5, even 6 iterations of your resume to get to the right one. I don't want to set an expectation you're going to spend 2 hours and have your new resume. You'll have your first iteration of the new resume, but again, you don't stop too early. The right version of your resume, the one that opens doors for you, takes longer, takes more work. Small changes change perception. Let's change yours. Now let's go to the story. We have to uncover the story to redevelop a resume. Story has a little bit of a problem with it because we think of things being made up. Well, that's not what I mean. What I mean is I can tell you the same truthful story in the most dull way possible. Or I can tell it to you in a very interesting way where you're hanging on every word on the edge of your chair. If I'm going to be effective, you have to do exactly what I do with my clients. And that means I'm going to do a deep dive interview, close down for inventory, and you're going to have to rediscover all those story elements that you hid under the bed or in the closet or let slip away or tossed away. Oh, don't look at that. Too old. Too minor. Too long ago. Of course, we have to be capable and qualified, but that's not really where we center the story. Yeah, that has to be a given. But that's not the reason I hire you. Now, don't mishear that. I wouldn't consider anybody that wasn't capable or qualified. So in my mind, that is just not a qualifier. Nobody gets considered without that. How are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you? What motivates you? You know, that's why you're going to get hired. That could have something to do with your professional life, could have nothing to do with your professional life. A lot more of that when we talk about LinkedIn next week. With my clients, I come up with about 8 or 9 pages of notes from this deep dive interview. You should probably come up with about the same. Capture everything on paper. look at it. Maybe it's as simple as grabbing a highlighter, being very, very stingy. What down here on these 8-9 pages of notes rises to the level of being something that is going to convince them it's the best business decision they make today if they choose to hire you. Those things get a little bit of a highlight. That's a drop of perfume, a ruby, diamond, emerald, nugget of gold. The rest that isn't highlighted is all negotiable, and you're going to have to filter that through. Everything else in there that is not highlighted is an element that somehow touches your brand, but it all can't go in there. So you're going to have to think about those things that separate you out from others, and you're going to have to filter them through that lens that I talked about. What rises to the level to be the best business decision that has to make the cut for the story. The other things, even though they're true. I did that. I'm like, doesn't need to see it. Put it by the wayside. Of course, when I was giving this lecture live at the public library, someone came up to me right after, hit me in the head with a brick of this resume, going, I've been told all I can expect is more of this. I'm like, what is it? What is it? Of course, I'm highly caffeinated, passionate about what I talk about. And it was 90 minutes into a lecture at that point at the public library. And I'm looking at it, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm going to fall asleep looking at this resume. I'm like, I better ask a question. What would you like to do? I'd love to be in events. I'm like, oh, that's great energy. Have you ever worked in events? Ouch. Now, let's just go a little bit larger here. I am me holding this resume. It says right there, events coordinator. If I cannot see it, how do you think anybody else can see it? All I see is impressive law firm, another impressive law firm, more law firm for you in your future. There's just no storytelling here. It's brick in the head, and I have no imagination about what comes for you. Even if I zoom in, I really don't get much beyond law firm. This is the same exact background. Have you ever done them? I follow up. I said, wait, have you ever done events? Because I said, I'd like to work at events. Oh, yeah. In fact, I've done events at the Heller Gallery, at Guggenheim, at the Met, at Lincoln Center, at the Morgan Library Museum. I'm like, why don't we tell that story? You'd be hired tomorrow. Well, I mean, I just wasn't doing that. I was also I did the RSVP, the catering, everything else. And I was a speaker wrangler. But who are the speakers? Ted Koppel, James Carville, Mary Matlin, Tom Brokaw, Charlie Rose. Well, a few of those names might have to change over time. But oh my gosh, why don't you tell that story? You'd be hired tomorrow. Now, 50% of their job was not exciting, not events. Don't talk about that. I never want to do that stuff again. So why would I put it here? I put the right story elements here that are all true. That's part of the transformation. How do you take a block of text that beats the story into the ground and make it come to life so it's just like being presented like an appetizer tray? Ever been to one of those fancy parties where they keep coming around with the delicious appetizers and you always just like one more and one more? Transformation in storytelling. We're this product that has to be reimagined to create engagement, which is, of course, a whole lot closer to that style engagement. Your job search, or the two worst things ever. It's a sales process mixed with a dating process, both of which usually make us want to run for the bathroom. Like, I need to get rid of my lunch. I get it. It's a tough thing to go out there and sell ourselves and also engage in that way. Small changes change perception. We're going to use personal branding to really kind of fix and change all of this. Now, brand is all those things that we showed you earlier, everything that can separate us out from others. And all of those are ways that I can separate my resume from other people. Now, I'm going to go a little bit smaller here and pull myself center stage here. These are some resumes I pulled off Pinterest. Someone was collecting resumes. I'm like, oh, I love resumes too. Thank you for collecting these. So it's almost easier to teach you about resume if I throw some darts at these and tell you what's wrong first. So kudos to Kelly on his or her name. Big, large, bold. I get it. I can't miss it. Fantastic. Not sure shades of yellow was the right choice because that's hard to look at on screen. And when I print it out, it comes out as shades of gray. Not very great. And that's the last positive thing I have to say about this resume. This resume suffers from something called a complete lack of failure to consider information architecture. Just like a building needs an architect. You just can't put up a building. You need an architect to decide all the important things. So here, I don't know whether I'm supposed to go down this left column first and then go back up to the right. Am I supposed to go across? How's it supposed to work? I have seconds. Doesn't work. Julia. Now, I didn't write these comments down at the bottom, but I'll read this one for you. It says, who said the name had to be at the top anyway? Well, I'll say it. Subtitle of my book is Changing the Rules. I love to change the rules. This is a rule you cannot change. If I'm sitting with a stack of 1,000 resumes, I'm looking at your name, employer title, employer title, employer title, education, reverse half moon. You have to conform to that. Otherwise, you disrupt in a way that doesn't benefit you. So while I didn't miss Julia's name, gosh, I don't know whether am I supposed to now start below Julia's name or start back at the top. Information architecture problem. Also, the way it's designed, the resume, I cannot actually see the employers. Now, you might go, well, John, those are blurred out. I'm like, yes, that's not what I actually mean. I mean, I can't see the employers. Oh, I could go intellectually find them. I have seconds of time. I'm not going to go intellectually find anything. If I don't see your brands, I have no idea of what you've actually delivered, because almost every single ounce of your value comes from who you did it for, not what you did, but who you did it for. Without the who you did it for, almost no value. In fact, if I take it even further with Julia's resume here, the only things I can see are the reasons I would not hire Julia, and that's dates. Dates are never a reason I hire you. Dates are only a reason I don't hire you. So why would you ever place the dates over in their eye path? Yes, dates are expected, but put them as far away from their eyes as possible. Over there, smaller and not bold. Don't look here. So yeah, that doesn't really work well. Let's see if we can go back to Martin here. Sorry about that. We'll show you Martin here. Martin here. Well, gosh, this format has been just floating around for decades. I've seen it so many times. Doesn't make sense to spend 25% of the entire real estate to tell me your contact information. You should be spending that real estate to tell me about why you're so amazing, not creating an information architecture problem with this blue column and then the one next to it. Do I go down or over? How's it supposed to work? And the only thing I can actually read here is education, internships, and personal skills. And those are silly labels pulling all the focus, and it should be your story pulling all the focus. You're a product too. You have seconds to capture their interest. Distracting formatting that doesn't elevate your story is not going to work. Remember, resume is about catching or piquing the interest. LinkedIn, in my view, is about closing the deal on that as the very, very best individual. All this together is how you influence other people. Now, let's come a little bit larger here, where I can join you again here. So we have to, whatever your resume starts out with, wall of text, whatever, you have to think about how you're going to go in there and find the clarity and increase the influence. Now, that clarity, by the way, is about your career path, about your story. And the influence piece is all about having an elevated feel for your deliverables. Why is this valuable for you? Much, much more valuable in this format. In case you haven't detected it already, you realize there's not a sentence on any resume I build for a client. Why would I put a sentence on a resume in a world where people don't read? So you do have to learn to distill down to concept communications to create that engagement, which is, of course, much closer to that. Let's get into the finer details. Here's 5 areas you have to focus on to create a really winning resume. First, you are a product 2, coming back to every one of these. You resume the new definition. Your resume's goals, understanding stacks of resumes. That's when you hit that darn submit button. And of course, the 3-second test for resumes. Back to the beginning. You are a product 2. When a company chooses to hire you, they're buying this product, or at least they're buying our time and talents. We get that part, even if we don't like the overall concept. Would you like to be the store brand? Think about going to the grocery store. Would you like to be the store brand? You know, label, always a little bit off. Design, color, a little bit off, a little bit off. Flavor, a little bit off, a little bit off. Price, oh, very good price. Would you rather be that, or would you like to be the national brand? You want to be the Kellogg's, the Coca-Cola, the Folgers, or you want to be the store brand? You're going to have to decide about your product. Resume the new definition, not a summary, not a biography, not a laundry list of everything I've done since childhood. This is a simple sales sheet to create desire. Get them in here, get them on the phone. I can't move forward without speaking to this person. That's the right resume. That's the right amount of story too. Not everything, just enough to keep them on the edge of their seat. Now, resume's goals, its mission is to deliver the interview. But if it's going to deliver the interview, it has to have some goals. And that's a clear, clean, straightforward format. That's a format where the information itself is put together. So not the things that you want to convey. Oh, we all have those. Oh, I'd love to tell this story. I get it. I get it. Whatever you think is of most interest to the decision maker, put together in such a way it can just be absorbed. Think of that word, absorbed, rather than read. Of course, it has to clearly inform about educational background. Now, if you don't listen to me and when you do hit that darn submit button, what happens? Well, first off, the resume is going off toward a gigantic black hole in space called the data warehouse. If it reaches the data warehouse, kiss that goodbye, and probably not statistically likely to see it again. But on the way to the data warehouse, it's going to stop in front of an individual, and that's where your real gem is. So that's your chance with 1,000, 2,000 resumes to catch their attention while they're droning out on all the other resumes. So what happens here? You're going to be sorted into one of three stacks. There might be somebody in here. That's the good stack, good stack. Maybe stack number 2. I have to come back and take another look. But they don't come back and take another look. Why would I come back to these folks that couldn't quite convey the value to me the first time? Oh, and I have an all new incoming river of resumes over here. These are new and exciting to me versus I couldn't figure out these the first time through. Of course, third stack is thanks, but no thanks. Not even sure why you sent this to me. If you didn't connect those dots, your very first goal that you may not like is the amount of, or the secret to the very first goal is the amount of time here. They're going to spend only 3 to 5 seconds, and you must get your resume into stack 1 or it's never actually going to be read. Your cover letter, statistically, never actually going to be read. Your email, statistically, never actually going to be read. Got to get it into stack 1. 1-page resume, unless it's 2. Why does this matter so much? Because almost any resume that's not a single sheet of paper almost by default goes into stack 2. Have to come back and take another look. Distill your story down. There's no time I will tell a client that they need a 2-page resume or that it's better to have a 2-page resume. A single sheet of paper to make them jump out of their chair. That's how you secure the interview. If you have more to say it over on the LinkedIn side. Now, what are we looking at? Name, which is the brand, the current or last 3 employers and titles, and your educational background. And now I better stop and do a little bit of a listening test, because in my in-person presentations afterward, I'll often hear people talking to each other going, oh, John said, just put the last 3 employers and titles. I did? When did I say that? I said what we're looking at. If you asked me a different question, John, what would you like on a resume? Oh, I'm so glad that you asked me. I'd like a resume to be complete from the time you enter the workforce to today. Again, that's a listening test. I said, that's what I'd like. I didn't say that was the right solution for you. If you've got work going back to the early 1970s, we don't need to see all of that. Yes, we can truncate certain things, and examples coming up of how to do that. So 3-second test for resumes. If you have your resume, pull it out. Now, before you look, you're going to look at this person, which is you, as if you don't know the person. Fresh eyes. And until I tell you to stop, when I do tell you to stop, just look up and tell yourself, what is it value-wise you can tell yourself about this person, which is you. So go ahead and take a look. And stop. And you're in one of those 3 stacks. Now, most people, when I do this in person, most people will look up from that like they're deer in the headlights going, I can't tell you anything about this person, and it's me. I'm like, you got a problem with that resume. It doesn't communicate anything. This is what you do each iteration of the resume. You come and put the new resume next to the old resume. What works, what's better, pick it up, do the 3-second test, back to the drawing board, 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations, whatever it takes to get to the right version. I objectives all of the time. Objective statements, all of that, all that nonsense at the top we don't read. Why don't you simplify that giant paragraph or the collection of core competencies or everything I've ever highlights of my achievements since kindergarten, all that kind of stuff, pull that nonsense out and get rid of it and simplify it like this: high energy events planner specialist, or campaign director, media, public relations, community liaison. These are all the roles they're going after, by the way. Or accomplished sales professional, software, hardware, services. More story on that one coming up. But you'll likely have something like this that you're beginning with, something that feels like dead weight or a brick even tied around the ankle. And we're going to have to figure out how we add clarity to that, how we're going to find the story that's really there, maybe avoid using terrible words that diminish us, things like coordinating and coordinated and maintained and duties. And duties are like duty. Nobody cares. Nobody's interested. Consistency matters. You can't use a dash and then use a TO. And so we have to look for the problems, and we have to begin to find the solutions, and we have to look for the story, and we have to begin to add that clarity and bring it to life. And we have to also not be so afraid of our background that we get the scissors out and cut off the wrong things. This person was so worried about being mature, they want to work in events, and they cut off Martha Stewart Living off their resume, or House Beautiful magazine, where they did events and something at the Guggenheim, or European Travel and Life magazine, where they did event-related things. Oh yes, we cut off the earlier ones, but there are even ways to hide these dates if we'd like to, and that's coming up to show you. Promised you a little bit more story on this one. This one's a very interesting one. Client came to me and 10, 11 years in contract furniture sales, like 1,000 desks type thing. And I'm so done. But every time I send out my resume, they go, but we don't need a furniture salesperson. I'm like, oh my gosh, quit talking about furniture. What would you like to do? Hardware, software, services. I'm like, oh, it's a great field. It's a field I used to place. That's why I know it's a great field. I'm like, have you ever done it? And they have 15 years ago. Now that may be someone's challenge listening today. You may have 15-year-old experience to sell, and this is how you do it. So first thing was to remove the furniture out of the equation. Why are you going furniture? You see Price Modern. I did not know them as a brand. You see Corporate Office Furnishings, the only place it shows up, and you see Hayworth as a brand, which I knew, of course. Other than that, there's not a single word about furniture here. It's everything about sales. Achieved $50 million cumulative sales to date, ranked top 10 in revenues every year since 2002, achieved a strong pipeline. Boom, everything to make a sales manager jump out of their chair. And then I simply use the positioning title at the top to connect it all. Sales professional. Extensive and experience across industries, software, hardware, services. Just what I'm looking for. Yes, I am. And then they see this wonderful super paragraph of deliverables, which we condensed, and then we expanded the earlier telling, which then did show their software, hardware, services. And of course, that's where they're working today. Now, this is a bottom of a resume, a few things to teach you here. If you decide to truncate your background, you're probably going to end up in a situation like this. Now, we decided to start this person's resume, or end it, depending on which way you look at it, with EDS, Electronic Data Systems, in 1999. Now, because we started this resume with that job in 1999, that's how the resume works. In the brain, this is 1999. Now, intellectually, we see the prior employers and we see the education. We know there's before 1999, but that's not how the brain works. The brain sees 1999, it makes a peg and goes 1999 for some reason. Now, EDS is one of those employers. You know, if they hire you, it must be magic, Financial services, do we know who that is? Goldman Sachs. So there's usually one or two in each industry. So that's a stunning place to start your story, essentially, or end your story, depending on which way we're looking at it. But look at these three prior employers. Two of these three prior employers also rise to that same level of stunning. Kaiser Permanente and PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, same reputation. I have three crown jewels that all hired you. You must literally almost walk on water. Except those three prior employers add 17 years of extra background. Does anybody need to be 17 years older the next time you go interview? Well, a few of us, not many. So that's also, I should say, is 3/4 of 1 inch on the piece of paper. So sizes are coming up, which you're going to have to write down. But as an example, EDS here is 10-point bold. When we get to prior employment, Systems Alliance, PwC, and Kaiser Permanente, those are all probably 8-point bold. The titles for those are probably 7.5. The locations are down around 6 point. That's 3/4 of an inch on the sheet of paper. And just like that fancy, expensive dessert that's on a giant plate, but it's only this big, with the drizzle and the sparklies and the cherry on top, works the same way. Everything does not have to be large to have an effect. Now, besides those, now, of course, I took off those dates. So if I took off those dates, I have to take off the dates of education. Cannot possibly allow them to do mathematics. Like, now, how old are you? No, can't have that happen. Other thing to notice from the bottom is I'm a big fan when we get down to education and prior stuff to talk about, we split the bottom of the resume. Only effective way to use that space. Notice there's 3 universities here, yet only 2 of them are treated the same. I'm sorry, this PMP, which if this is your field, you're probably jumping out of your chair. Oh, tattoo it on my forehead, put it at the top of the resume. No, that belongs down here. That is the cherry on top of the entire dessert. They will not miss that PMP. I'm very confident of that. And I'm sorry, the PMP does not trump the 2 degrees. The 2 degrees are better than the PMP, even though the PMP is the flashy piece. So yes, everything where it's intended to be to sell you and position you properly, right down to community involvement or passions or whatever it is that shows you're a real human being, hopefully giving back a little bit or being driven by some passion of your own. This is how you outmaneuver your competitor very, very quickly. Again, if we're going to solve the real resume issues, we have to address both. We have to address the story. We have to address the format. So let's get into the format side now. Your contact line should be a single line across the top of the resume. That's starting with your LinkedIn profile URL, your city and state. Nope, I don't hire you because you live at 123 any street. All that can disappear. Your email address, and then your cell phone number, not your home phone number. I don't care that you can't get your cell phone number in your home phone. That's the one that goes there. And you realize, based on what's on screen here, exactly why those two things are on the outside. Let's get to the rest of the formatting. Size is not written down anywhere. I would jot these notes down. I will show you how to adjust the sizing in screens coming up. So the whole resume, we're going to highlight the whole thing. We're going to start with everything at 10 point. Everybody sitting down, because we're going to go down from 10 point. It has to all change. Now, subtitle of my book, Changing the Rules. We're going to violate that rule right away. We're going to go up to the name and make it 18 point bold. Big, bold name. That's the brand, not little John Crant. No, John Crant. Big. 18 point bold. We're going to add 2 points of space after the name. Of course, contact line isn't here on Betty Jo's because she's my cousin. I figured you didn't need that. We're going to add that contact line, which is 7 point. When it goes 7 point, it's going to get very tiny. We'll just add space. Space is coming up. We'll show you how that works. Down the rest, everything on that resume is 10 point. That's where we begin. So the brands, that's Good Samaritan Village, Salvation Army, United Way, those are all 10 point bold. But I hope you've already noticed the rest of that line, comma, location, and date, are not only not bold, they're certainly not 10 point. In this iteration, there's 7 point. There's 2 points of space after the line. We'll show you how you add that in. Before title, you'll notice on Good Samaritan Village, of course, we have an extra line we have to talk about. We'll come back to that. Let's just go to the normal Salvation Army employer title. So employer is 10 point bold. The title, we like a half a point less. Not bold, so it's not fighting, but italicized, so it's still drawing attention. They work in harmony with each other, both drawing attention. So 9.5 in size, italicized, not bold. And then we like 4 points of space after the title. Now, bullet point sets, you can do each bullet point set one at a time. Just scroll over the whole set. And I make the bullet point set 8.5 in size. When I do, it's going to get a little tight, a little hard to read. We're going to add some spacing to that shortly. The spacing for the bullet point sets is 1.75 points of space. We're going to show you how to add that. Don't fear about that. Let's go back to this one special line up at Good Samaritan Village, the nation's largest non-for-profit long-term care organization. This is another significant employer. Why is this line here? Because I lived in Florida 13 years before I escaped, and I can tell you every second or third mobile home or trailer park in Florida ends in the word village. I can't possibly think someone picks up this resume and goes, oh, impressive employer, impressive employer. Oh my gosh, your career went right into the toilet. What happened? No, this is another impressive employer. If the random person sitting next to you has not heard of this employer, you need to put this qualifier line in to set its value. If the random person sitting next to you has certainly heard of this employer, don't waste the real estate on that. Spend that real estate talking about your own brand. You get how it works here. If I need that extra qualifier line, it's 8 point in size, and there's 2 points after it. So all of the work to really set the correctness, the spacing, all that comes from having a pre-press background, which means I really do understand the line, the type of spacing. So just whatever you decide to do, make a rule list. Every title is this. Every title has this much space after it. Every brand is this. Every brand has this much space after it. Every bullet is this. As long as you make a rule list and stick to it, people will go, oh, it just speaks to me somehow. Your story just comes to life. I'm like, yes, from all that actual physical hard work in the setup. Now, how do we add space? Now, little bit of a caveat of an apology for Microsoft here, because they make about 20 different versions of this software and they all seem to work a little differently. So conceptually learn what I'm showing you here. This is how my version works, and locate this on your version. So if I'd like to add space between the lines or between the characters, two different things, between the lines, I simply go to Format, down to Paragraph on my version. And on my version, I'll get a little box that pops up that has points after. In the points after, I can simply put the 2 or the 1.75 points or the 8 points after spacer titles like professional education, 7-point bold with a little gray, but then 8 points of space after it. Education, same thing, all caps, bold, 7-point, a little bit of gray. So those two things disappear into the background, giving framework, but 8 points of space after it. 1.75 with the bullet points. I think you got most of the other ones there. 4 points of space after the titles. All do it in this window. Now, you may need to add space or take away space, condense, on a line this way sometimes. Not this way, but this way. Got a bullet point that suddenly, went to a second line. I don't like that. Well, I could go up under Format, down into Font. I could click the Advanced tab, and now I can either expand or contract character spacing by 0.1 or 0.2 or 0.3, never beyond 0.3. It's at this size, it won't work for you. 0.1 is best. We can stick to that if we have to. And that way you can slightly adjust the lines so they work as well for you. This is how you remove the work for the reader. You may have 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations even to get to the right version. Don't stop too early. Your work pedigree, well, if we're thinking dog food and horses, we got the right word. You probably get the concept of the 3 to 5 seconds per resume, but I don't think you're getting the way we're judging you. We're looking at the quality of these companies, right or wrong, titles and accomplishments, even though we say we wouldn't read those accomplishments, and of course, educational background. Here's the example. Todd Smith, Nestle USA, Kraft Foods, Director of Quality Assurance at Nestle, Kraft Foods, Quality Assurance Manager, Coca-Cola Company, Quality Assurance Engineer, University of Florida, BS in Agriculture. If this is all that's on the resume, I guarantee it is the simplest resume in the world. And yet everybody has an opinion here about Todd. I mean, what can we get? Always got the degree. That's usually a pretty good thing. I see career progression. I see engineer to manager to director. And oh my gosh, these are 3 dazzling companies. Are they? How do you know? Now, I never worked food and beverage. I can't tell you whether these are good or bad or ugly. But almost every company I've seen is messed up beyond belief. I mean, there's a few that probably aren't, but I have a close friend and client that has worked for Genuity and Liberty Media and Level 3 Communications and Nokia Siemens Networks and Cisco Systems and Motorola Solutions. And I can tell you every single one of those names I just mentioned completely messed up beyond belief inside. It's like a meat grinder grinding up and spitting out their employee parts nonstop. And that's where my friend works in that field. Okay. I can't tell you if those are any good or not, but those name brands certainly have the brand value. Perception is if you work for them, you must have learned what to do or what not to do. So let's prove this to you. We're going to promote you up to manager. You have to hire this spot that we're looking at Todd for, but you have 1 spot left for interview. You got 2 candidates. You got Todd here, which you see, and you got this other candidate who has the same BS in agriculture from University of Florida. They have the same engineer to manager to director, same exact background. But they did it for 3 food and beverage companies you've never heard of. Let's see, there's like 1 million of those. Who gets that interview? Todd or the other one? Todd or the other one? There's no question here. Todd gets this interview every single time. That's the power of the brands. So understand the value everywhere, nowhere to be seen. What you're going to gain is all determined by those bullet points, those achievements, those tangible deliverable items you put under those titles and those employers. So focus your story on these elements, but all of it somehow coming back to performance, always about how you affected things, increase things or change things. That's the real story here. Degrees of degrees. Have you received in hand your college degree? I know, very, very strange way to ask it. All we need to know here is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You know what? If you didn't pay that $168 that you still owed, you know what that is? No degree. If you're 3 credits shy of what you needed, you know what that is? No degree. If you didn't complete your degree, you still need the credit for what you did do. You put your college or university, you put your coursework toward field of study, but not a coursework toward a BS and whatever. That is too close to the baloney line. You cannot have a little bit of 3-card Monty on education. Any sense you're misrepresenting here, you are done. So coursework toward field of study, you get your whole credit and everything else. You don't need the rest. By the way, once you are in your career already producing amazing things, the reason they keep verbally dinging you and hitting you about that degree is simply to reset your financial expectations so that if they want to hire you, we can pay them less. We can pay this person less because they don't have the degree. And I've already injured them by going, oh, you didn't finish your degree? Good, they're expecting less now. It's not what you're selling. You're selling the expertise that you've built up now, the deliverables you've built up now, you've been able to do. Designing your resume. Really, the whole idea behind designing your resume is to move your brand forward. How am I going to help them visualize my career path, my deliverables, my tangibles? Of course, I have to inform about educational background as well. Let's give you a last word about Word. No special warmth for Microsoft. I would like Microsoft if they wrote great software, but really they write, I hate to say the worst crap on the planet, but very, very close. Word is a wonderful example of the worst that they put out. Spent all this effort trying to figure out how do we get them onto a subscription model for text editing. I'm like, subscription for a text editor? Nonsense. But instead of working on all that over these years, they might have actually solved their problem, which they've never done. And that is, if you spend all this time to make your resume perfect and then you dare send the Word version to someone, you have no idea what it looks like. It's going to arrive on their computer or my computer and might look fairly similar to what you put together. It might look like a completely different animal. I was doing a reality TV pilot episode a few years back. Someone wanted to do like a makeover show, and my segment was going to be the career portion of it. And so I'd gotten done with my lecture and was walking across the park to meet them at this guy's apartment where they were filming. And producers had sent me the resume ahead of time to redo it. It was a normal, terrible resume, page and a half resume, not much on it, not very exciting. Of course, I had to reinvent it without speaking to the person because that was just part of the challenge. And when I get to the apartment, now they're already broken down for lunch. My segment's going to be filmed out in Queens somewhere. So I'm over there just to say hello and get ready to go film my segment and pull out his resume, the original resume, by the way, not the new one. Have to save that for camera. You cannot be surprised twice. And as I was like, oh my gosh, what happened to my resume? What do you mean? This is your resume. This is the original. And so he runs to the next room where he retrieves his resume, which was a single sheet of paper. It was not just dipped onto a second sheet. It was a full page and a half. Yes, the text was identical in a completely different way because it reflowed with my preferences file. Preferences file that told it what to look like stayed on his computer. When you were all done doing all these refinements on your resume, check out my YouTube Headless Horseman video, walk you through basically how to convert it to a PDF. So it is perfect no matter who's looking at it and who's printing it, no matter what software created it. That's part of really taking control of your brand. Wherever you are on reinventing your resume, take your first step. Learn how to repeat, and refine until you get to that very best version. This version of my resume renovation lecture is for out professionals education. Hopefully you guys will check out my others in the series. We are covering LinkedIn. We are covering job search itself. We're covering how to reach out to decision makers, all the ways that affect and elevate your brand and really change the equation in your job search. If you need help, don't hesitate to reach out. Check my SelfRecruiter website under the services tab. And if you need to talk before you know which one is right for you, just reach out and say hello. We'll set up a time to chat. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please do like, comment, share, all that other fun stuff that will help others, and keep working on your brand and keep focused, because you have to believe in yourself more than the next 5 or 6 people that want that same job, or you're not going to beat them. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next session. Take care.